pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Town Council meeting will begin. In the interest of social distancing and Governor Mills' social distancing limitations, members of the public are strongly encouraged to participate electronically. There is listed on the website information for any member of the public that wishes to join us Wednesday virtually. All right, we will call the meeting to order, and the first thing on the agenda at this point in time, because of the situations, is a presentation via Zoom from the Maine Department of Environmental Protection on the PFAS investigation. So are they on?
They are, and I believe Nancy McGrady from the Department of Agriculture was going to start this evening, and she is on here.
Okay.
So she should.
There she is. All right.
She is.
Hi. Thank you for inviting us to be first. So as I begin, I can ask everyone to please mute their own buttons, please.
Yes. Whoever Nick Gurr is, please mute your button. Mute your button, please. Your lower left-hand corner of your...
Good evening, everybody. My name is Nancy McGrady. I'm the Bureau Director at the Bureau of Agriculture, Food, and Rural Resources within the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry of the state of Maine. I'm here tonight with a number of my colleagues to speak with you all about PFAS and what we are doing as a state with respect to its presence here in the state of Maine. My role tonight will be relatively short. I'm going to provide a brief overview on information about what PFAS chemicals are, where they are in the environment and why they're there, and how we came to find them in the Fairfield area. Michelle, I did provide some basic handouts. Hopefully you can share your screen on that, which will help guide my discussion. Thank you. So if you want to go ahead to the second slide, please.
Just give me 1 minute.
You can move to the next slide. Like I said, got ahead of myself here. This is what I'll be speaking to very quickly tonight to get us kicked off. Michelle, please, the next slide. PFAS, in its very essence, are fluorinated chemicals. They are man-made. And these chemicals, because of what they are comprised of, fluorine and carbon, these components bind together very, very strongly, and as a result, do not break down in the environment like other types of chemicals might. And instead, they persist for a long time in the environment, which has deemed them the nickname of being forever chemicals. There are well over 4,000 types of PFAS chemicals. And when we're talking tonight, we'll primarily be talking about one or two in particular. You can go to the next slide, please. So why are they in our environment and where are they being found? Well, PFAS chemicals have been ubiquitous in our society really since the beginning or the mid 20th century. So we're well into 50 plus years, 70 years of these chemicals being utilized in a host of different types of products that we're familiar with every single day because they're very effective at what they do. They resist water, so water repellent clothing and textiles and furniture, for instance. They resist stains, stain-resistant fabric, furniture, etc. They resist heat, and they resist grease. So again, packaging, cookware, electronics, there's many, many, many ways in which they can be utilized. And because they were utilized so wisely, they are present in our environment. And they have been found in our wastewater because of the things that we wash or that we excrete from our own body. And so they're in our septic tanks and then go into wastewater treatment plants as well. And from there, they can go into groundwater and soils by virtue of the ways in which they're disposed thereafter. Next slide, please. So why are we finding PFAS in Maine? Maine, and many other states, has had a legal, longstanding practice of land spreading of these treated wastewater residuals. Another term for them might be sludges or biosolids, as well as industrial residuals, so paper mill residuals, ash, sludges, etc. The practicality of using these treated residuals on agricultural fields is because they do have organic matter in them and they can benefit the ground so that a farmer doesn't have to utilize costly synthetic fertilizers, for instance. So they do have a beneficial reuse aspect to them. And again, these were utilized and permitted under state rules because PFAS, frankly, was not known to exist, or the implications of them were not known at the time. This is an emerging chemical, unfortunately, and we're really just beginning to understand the long-term impacts here. PFAS can also be found at former military sites and unlined landfills and other locations, but Maine primarily has been seeing it also in lands that have had this applied for agricultural purposes. Back in 2016, a dairy farm in Arundel, Maine, with a history of spreading the residuals, was found to have its milk be contaminated by PFAS. And that milk was at a level above the state's action level for PFOS. That's one of the two main PFAS chemicals that I mentioned a moment ago. Our action level is 200 ppt. That stands for parts per trillion. And so they were above that. Next slide, please. The situation in Arundel prompted the department to begin testing retail fluid milk in the state. We wanted to ascertain the health and safety of Maine milk that is produced in milk and also processed in milk. So we took a very all-encompassing review of fluid retail milk beginning in June 2019. Round one had very good results. Processors were coming in well below or non-detect with the 50 parts per trillion, much lower than the 210 that I mentioned a moment ago. That was the level of detection that the laboratory we used could actually find PFAS at. We conducted another round this year, and while the vast majority of the results, again, came in of no concern, there was one processor that had a result that we wanted to investigate further. It was actually above 65 parts per trillion. And what we did...
what if it's like below 65, you know what I mean?
So what I'm saying is that and maybe we can wait for questions when I'm done the presentation, but what I will say is the state standard for when we would find milk to be adulterated that could not be sold commercially is 210 parts per trillion. We used a laboratory that was able to detect PFAS first in June at a level of 50 parts per trillion. And then they improved their methodologies such that by less than a year later, they were down to 25 parts per trillion. So they're very sensitive in what they're able to detect. So when we, in February 2020, found a processor that was above that very sensitive reporting limit of 25 parts per trillion, and in fact was, I believe, 65 parts per trillion, we thought, well, this is a processor. They're processing a lot of milk from a lot of farmers, and they're still coming up with a level, a hit that we think is worth investigating. And before I talk about where that investigation led us, I will let everyone know that the Department of Agriculture will be doing another retail test next month. So Michelle, if we could go to the next slide, please. So where this then intersects with Fairfield is that in working with the processor on that one sample of milk that had exceeded the 25 parts per trillion and we wanted to learn more about, we worked with them and we were able to trace it back. There were 3 potential farms based on how much they had added to the silo of milk that was tested. And there was also one farm, small farm, that had a history of biosolid application. And this is how the department was able to identify Tozier Dairy Farm in Fairfield. The results did confirm PFAS contamination of their milk. And Tozier did amend their field, apply biosolids over the course of the mid-1980s to the early 2000s. I think that might be my last slide, but what I would say here, and no, I've got a few more, but before we move on, you know, the Toziers, again, were doing something that they were allowed, they were permitted to do, and they were doing it as we all were in the same boat, not knowing that PFAS was in those biosolids. And the unfortunate reality is that those biosolids unfortunately did contain PFAS that is coming back at highly elevated rates of PFOS. The next slide is just for folks, it's the more information about where they can find more information, articles, et cetera, about PFAS. And then my contact information is at the end. I do want to be respectful of the time of the council tonight and everyone coming in. And I know you may have more questions specific to agriculture and milk per se, but do know for everyone watching, I have a number of colleagues here that are going to talk more in detail about what is happening in Fairfield and the additional research and testing that's been happening. So I'll turn it back to the chair and see how you guys want to go. Otherwise, I think my colleague David Burns from the Department of Environmental Protection would speak next.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Nancy, for that. I want to thank the council and Michelle for having us here tonight to talk with you about the work the state is doing regarding PFAS testing in the vicinity of the Ohio Hill Road area in town. By way of introduction, my name is David Burns. I'm the director of the Bureau of Remediation and Waste Management at the DEP. Also here with me tonight to answer questions as they come up is Molly King, who is the director of the Division of Technical Services. Some of you may have already met Molly. She's been on the ground in Fairfield doing some work to support staff as well. From the results that we've seen so far, we know that this is news that you don't want to hear, especially as there are not easy solutions, but we're striving to protect public health under complicated circumstances. We truly do care about the residents' health and impact this has on your lives and properties. And it's important to understand that we will not have all the answers to questions you may have at this time. And I know that can be frustrating at times, but it's also important that we're open and honest with you in that regard. So how did the department come here? As Nancy laid out to you, it was through the retail milk testing program. This farm was identified as something that needed further investigation to understand PFAS levels at the site. So working with our colleagues...
Wait, I'm a little lost. What is PFAS again?
That is the per polyfluoroalkyl substances. That is the contaminant that we're investigating in Fairfield right now. It's a synthetic man-made chemical.
Oh, okay, I see. Thanks.
So working with DACF, and I'm going to use that acronym, it's easier than saying it out each time, but that's where Nancy McBrady works. Working with them, we compiled available information about past licensed biosolids land application activities associated with the farm, as well as interviewing the farmer to understand their operations and determine fields that biosolids may have been land applied on. So I just want to set the stage. Many of you are probably familiar with this site, but the farm is several hundred acres in size. Land application occurred from 2 different materials that was licensed to happen at this site. The first is sludge from the Kennebec Sanitary Treatment District in Waterville. The second is a lime-stabilized wastewater treatment plant sludge and dewatered septage known as EnviroSoil. The KSTD sludge was land applied from the 1980s through the early 2000s. The EnviroSoil product was land applied between 2006 and 2015. That information is based on best available records that we have at this time. Also, DEP records for land application of the KSTD sludge are incomplete until the late 1980s. So we also reviewed KSTD's records in addition to interviewing the farmer. Also important to note that just because a field was licensed for land application of sludge does not mean that it was used. And that makes our investigation more difficult, trying to tease out what was licensed and what was actually used. I also want to note that the farmer has been and remains very cooperative despite the impact to farm operations. Similarly, the homeowners that we have spoken to are certainly concerned but respectful, and we sincerely appreciate that. So getting into more of the specifics, as we do at any contaminated site, regardless of the contamination, we begin testing near the suspected source area. In this case, that would be the farm and nearby fields. Early testing involved milk, dairy feed, meaning the hay and corn silage, manure, and nearby field soils. We also tested soils immediately surrounding one of the barns, as we had initial reports that AFFF, which is firefighting foam, may have been used in the past to extinguish a fire at the barn. This turned out not to be the case, as evidenced through sampling. But as the early results came in, we began to develop a conceptual site model, and I would equate that to being like a scientific hypothesis, and then we begin to do additional testing based on that and adjust as we learn more about the site. So the initial results of those areas we tested showed levels of concern. As we prepared to do more testing, we developed 2 goals for the site. First one was, if possible, identify fields with PFAS levels below our screening levels so that the farmer could resume operations as quickly as possible. The second goal was to identify the extent and nature of contamination across the various non-contiguous fields either owned or operated by the farmer, and gain a better understanding of PFAS levels in the soil, as well as levels in the hay and corn grown on these fields being fed to the cows. Michelle, if you could put up that slide showing the fields that I provided, that would be helpful at this time. So,
Just one second. Right there.
I'll give it a second to come up. And maybe if you could zoom out a little bit, it's a little bit of a large
file.
figure. There we go, that's good, right? Maybe you can increase it just 1 level. There, I can work with that. So based on the initial results, we continued testing by stepping out away from the original source area and tested nearby land application fields. So on the figure that you're looking at right now, what I call the initial source area, or at least what we thought it was the farm location, which is the grouping down to the lower left. Yes, thank you for showing that. And then we stepped out to other fields. So this map shows the fields that are licensed for land application of sludge or biosolids at this site. It would be all of the fields shown regardless of color on this map. Now the significance of the color, and I know that this question has been asked by a few people, is the areas that are shown in green are areas that we've conducted testing for PFAS. We have taken soil samples to understand the levels of various PFAS compounds that are at this site. The ones that are shown in the, I guess it's a mustard color, are fields that we have not tested. So we prioritized our testing based on records so that we were trying to sample fields with a higher loading of biosolids first, as well as fields with little or no biosolids application. And those fields with little or no known biosolids applications may have been subject to manure spreading. And the significance of manure spreading is that PFAS can cycle through, so it goes from being in the soil up through a crop such as hay or corn, goes at different rates. That is then fed to the cows. It ends up in the manure and can be spread back on the fields. So there's a very complicated cycle that we need to understand all of the inputs and components to. So the fields are located, I'm sure most of you know this area, but the Ohio Hill Road area, yes, thank you for pointing that out, runs along there. At the top of the screen, that is the intersection with Route 201, and across the road is Courier Road and Nye Corner Drive, if I believe I have that name correct. So the additional testing showed very high levels in the soils at some of the fields, and particularly the fields that are shown in green. Michelle, if you could move to the left and down just a little bit with your cursor. Right on the screen you're on is perfect. To that next grouping to your left. Yes. These are what we term the ridge road soils or ridge fields, and those had fairly high levels in the soil results that we saw. So based on these results, it led us to sampling both surface water and residential drinking water supplies nearest to these fields. I also have received a question about whether or not we had sampled the Goodwill Hinckley properties or at the Sappy landfill. Those are off of this map to the top of the map. Goodwill Hinckley, I guess, is on there. To my knowledge, we have not sampled at either of those locations. We do have test results for lime mud and wood ash from the Sappy mill that's part of a licensed land application program. And these results did not show levels of concern in the materials. So our current focus associated with the farm is the residential well sampling effort in homes adjacent to the licensed land application fields, and specifically along that section of Ohio Hill Road near the intersection of Route 201, as well as the Courier Road and Nye Corner Drive area. So through that area right there. As we've done with previous site investigation work, we start with residential wells nearest to what we believe is the source area with the highest likelihood of being impacted, and then step out from there in a sequence of steps. At the time we started seeing the number of wells potentially involved, the town was brought into the conversation now that we're dealing with a larger area and dealing with residents in the town that could be impacted. So in July, we were simply testing back at the farm site, looking at soils, looking at the various crops, the feed sources, the manure. And as time went by, we were able to step out and expand to further test that hypothesis I talked about earlier. We started seeing that there was a next level that we needed to go to, which is the residential drinking water supplies. PFAS testing is tedious work. You have to be extremely careful so that you don't contaminate the samples just by the means that you take the samples by. As Nancy pointed out, we're measuring things in the parts per trillion range, which is almost unheard of in the sampling world that I typically deal in. And it takes time for the laboratories to run these samples. There's strict quality control measures. It can take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, depending on what the actual sample is from the time we send it to when we get results. Also have to factor in how busy the lab is. So from July until now has been this sequence of stepping out and trying to understand what's going on at this site. To date, we have sampled 28 wells. We have results for 17 of those wells. We're waiting on 11 more at this time.
Nigger. Fuck all niggers.
Would you like me to continue at this time? Okay.
Yes.
Of the
Please.
results we've received of the 17, 12 exceeded EPA's lifetime health advisory of 70 parts per trillion in drinking water for PFOA, PFOS, or a combination of PFOA and PFOS. It's our understanding that 3 of the 12 wells were not being utilized for other reasons unrelated to PFAS. So any resident whose well tested above the health advisory has been advised they should not drink the water. We've set up an interim plan now for distributing 1 week's worth of bottled water to the impacted residents. That distribution occurred last Friday. We also understand the town has secured an additional 30 days worth of bottled water from a supplier as a temporary measure. And we're going to continue to work with the town to set up additional measures for temporary water distribution as needed beyond this time period. And as additional results on private wells come in, if we see that they're above the health advisory, they will be added to this program as well. Additional work will be forthcoming on designing and installing long-term treatment systems for any of these impacted residents that are above the health advisory. We haven't got to the point of designing those yet. Typically for PFAS compounds, it would be a carbon filter. It would need to be designed to handle the levels of PFAS that we're seeing. So that will take a little bit of time to get in place, but it is our goal because it is a fairly standard method for treating PFAS in drinking water supplies. We're also trying to determine if there are any observable differences in the field where the 2 types of biosolids that I mentioned earlier were spread. That's the KSTD sludge and the Enviro soil. And the reason that that's important to us is it'll help inform us of future testing needs and priorities. So we have a field that, based on records and discussions with the farmer, we believe took only the Enviro soil. So we have sampled that field to see if there are any differences from what we're seeing at the fields that accepted the KSTD sludge. I do not have those results yet. It's still a work in progress. We're also looking at other sites where KSTD has land-applied biosolids. We're performing what I call screening level assessments of these other sites in the central Maine area to determine if follow-up testing is needed, and we hope to have those results shortly. So that concludes what I wanted to present with regards to what we have done for testing and what we have seen in the results. And I believe Dr. Smith from CDC is going to talk to you next about the health impacts.
Michelle, you can go ahead and bring my slides up, and I'll leave it to you to decide whether you want to take some questions first or wait until all the way to the end.
So, Andy, I don't think I have slides for you. I will look. Did you email them?
I don't know if you can, I don't think you can hear you.
And I'm just waiting to see the slide deck show up.
You should be able to hear me. Andy, I don't have slides for you. Chad, is my microphone working?
Obviously not.
Obviously not. I'm afraid if I unmute myself.
No, you're working, Michelle.
Okay. So, Andy, I don't have slides for you at all for this meeting. He can't hear me.
Nope.
I'm probably going to get some feedback, but I don't have slides for you, Andy.
Dave, did you forward those on, or did that?
I did not forward them on. I thought yours were still draft. I'm sorry, Andy, that's my fault.
If you email them to me right now, I'll open the file.
Yeah. Apologies.
Well, that was a mix-up on my end, apparently, so I'm sorry.
Oh, come on. I got to go to California and back before I can get them.
Andy, I just want to confirm, are you sending them, or is this the 103 slide deck that you want me to send?
Yes, the 103 slide deck
Okay.
that I sent you.
Yep. All right, they're on their way, Michelle.
Maybe. Is it a really big file? Come on. There it is.
If I could ask a question while we're waiting, that would be great.
It's here.
That sounds like a good use of
Oops.
time. Oh,
Okay.
well, that worked. Thanks for asking the question to make the slide show up. And Michelle, you can go right to the second slide. And just making sure everybody can see that. So what I'm going to try to do in just a few minutes is talk about what are some of the health effects that there's the most scientific consensus for with these chemicals called PFAS. Again, that's perfluorinated alkyl substances. And it's a whole family of chemicals. And then I'll talk a little bit about the drinking water advisory limit we use and some of the other questions that I think you've asked and that we've got. I'm getting an echo.
Okay.
All set?
I think so.
And as I do this, I'll try to respond to some of the questions that Michelle emailed us and that we've received as we've talked to some of the individuals that have elevated levels in their well waters for the questions we've got from them as well. So to begin with, what I'm showing you in this slide are several of the major health effects that have been associated with these chemicals. Where we've learned a lot about this is there's an area in the Ohio Valley that is next to a DuPont facility that made Teflon that resulted in contamination of their public water supply. So an entire community of people were drinking water on a regular basis with levels between, roughly 2,000 and 5,000 parts per trillion. That's similar to some of the higher levels we're seeing in some of the wells with the highest levels of PFAS in Fairfield. So it's a relevant study. And they had a court order and court funding to do a health study and look for those endpoints where they felt there was a probable link between the exposure to these chemicals in the water that people were drinking and these health effects. And so you can see some of the ones that they felt there were a probable link, which some of these have been further confirmed since this time with other human studies, an increase in cholesterol levels, decreased vaccine response in children, changes in liver enzymes, increased high blood pressure during pregnancy, small decrease in infant birth weight as a result of exposure, and an increased risk of kidney cancer and testicular cancer. These are the ones where they feel there's, again, a probable link. One of the things I want to point out of interest with these is that some of these findings have occurred in the absence of disease. And what I mean by that is while there seems to be a reproducible finding, for example, of increased cholesterol levels associated with exposure, there isn't this clear evidence of an increased risk of heart disease. Likewise, there's a number of studies which show this decreased vaccine response in children. It's an endpoint we see in the animal studies. The evidence seems fairly strong, but we don't see compelling evidence of an increase in disease or illness amongst children or others in response to this. Changes in liver enzymes, you can measure it, but it doesn't seem to translate into increased liver disease. And then the small decreases in birth weight seems to be a reproducible finding, but the magnitude of the birth weight change isn't big enough to be considered clinically below birth weight. Is somebody trying to speak? And then the cancer evidence is limited so far to kidney and testicular, mostly for humans, maybe some suggestive evidence for prostate. I want to emphasize that brain cancer has not been found to be associated with these chemicals. And I know that was a question given the concern over a potential cluster of brain cancers in Fairfield back in circa 1999, 2000. There was a study around that. So I just want to say again, I'm not aware of any evidence of a link between PFAS and brain cancer. If we could go to the next slide, please. So a number of people are learning about PFAS in their well water that they're drinking. They're being told not to drink the water, and that is a decision being based on looking at the measured levels relative to a US EPA health advisory level that has been used for public water supplies nationally and is used by a number of states as well. And that number is 70 nanograms per liter, or we also sometimes call that parts per trillion. So you'll see it referred to in both types of those units. So that's the number we're using. EPA applies this number to the PFAS chemical called PFOA, that's a perfluorooctanoic acid, or PFAS, perfluorooctane sulfonate, those are two. They'll apply it either to them individually or to the sum of the two, thinking that they're similar chemicals, they may act by the same mechanism, they may have an additive effect, so we'll apply it to either individually, if only one is there, or the sum. In Maine, as in a number of other states, we are now applying this 70 number to a sum of 5 individual PFAS that we encounter in water samples and we're encountering here, and that we also are wondering about whether they act in the same way and have an additive effect. So again, this 70 is applying to the sum of 5 individual PFAS chemicals. What we've learned so far is that when it comes to drinking water, your primary route of exposures of concern are drinking and beverage preparation, think coffee, tea, juice from concentrate, etc., and cooking. And with cooking, it's primarily foods that have to be hydrated or incorporate water as part of a recipe and are consumed frequently. Drinking and beverage preparation is probably 80% of your exposure potential. Cooking is then after that. Things like bathing, showering, brushing teeth are trivial exposures and are not considered to be things you need to worry about. So it's really those first two at the top row, drinking and beverage preparation, and then after that, especially for some of the higher levels, then you start to want to use something else for cooking as well. Next slide, please. We've been asked a number of times about pets. And is it okay to use contaminated water for providing to your pets? We're human toxicologists, not veterinarians, so that's not a usual field that we work in. But I do want to make the point that when we derive these drinking water advisory levels for people, we start with animal data, and then we do big adjustments to those numbers when we extrapolate from the animal data to humans, as much as 2,000 or 6,000 fold, to take into account the different half-lives, how long these chemicals stay in our bodies versus animal bodies, and we want to protect sensitive individuals. Those adjustments we wouldn't make in the same way if we're just extrapolating to other animals. So the levels that would be of concern for pets are going to be much, much, much higher than the levels that we focus on for protecting humans. So I just wanted to make that point clear, that you wouldn't want to apply that 70 part per trillion in worrying about your pets. It would be a number much higher than that. Next slide, please. One of the things really since the farm with PFAS contamination in southern Maine and Arundel was first brought to our attention, that we've been spending a lot of time on, is this notion of these agronomic exposure pathways here. I'm showing you the crops, such as whether it's hay or corn, to the cow, to the milk, to the child. And there are a number of reasons. One, we've got the presence of this, so you need to have a decision act. You need to know how much is too much in milk, and if that's too much, you need to take action. And then you need to figure out, if there's too much in milk, where did it come from? Was it the water? Was it the soil to plant? And so you have to try to figure that out by modeling and measuring a lot of things. While we have a federal number for how much is too much in drinking water, there are no federal numbers, and for that matter, no other state numbers as to how much is too much in milk or how much is too much in beef. So we had to, in order to support our Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry, derive those numbers ourselves. And we've had to develop these models for being able to predict from a soil level what that would mean from a exposure point of view for someone drinking milk or eating beef. So that's been a major focus of our efforts over the past 2 or 3 years, is to develop and refine these. One of the questions is about protection of children, and what I want to point out is when we derive these numbers, we're looking to see who's most exposed. Is it an adult or is it a child, in terms of how much milk they drink or how much beef they consume as a function of body weight? And often it's the child, not because they eat more, but they eat more as a function of their body weight. So we often set our action levels to protect the child, and then that also protects the adult. So we've done that with the milk number, and we've done that with the beef number. We've had to look to the literature to see what we can learn about plant uptake, but even at the Tozier's farm, we're doing studies to actually determine plant uptake in hay and corn, so we can improve our ability to model and make predictions for other sites that we may run into. Next slide, please. And then in the same way, one of the questions we've got from people that have elevated levels in their water and have their own chickens is, what about eggs? So we're in the process right now of trying to research how to do those sort of computations. So we can say is how much is too much water if you're raising chickens to get eggs to feed them. And again, we'll look at egg intake by a child and egg intake by an adult and use whichever one has the highest intake rate as a function of body weight. So we protect the person who's most exposed. And that's something we hope to have wrapped up in the next week or two to provide advice to people on that question. Next slide. And I think we're getting close to the end. So as we learn more, we try to provide FAQs of responses to frequently asked questions. We put these into little fact sheets to give out. This is an example of one we recently shared with a daycare which had some concerns over this issue. So these are things we try to make available to help explain to people what PFAS is, how you can be exposed, what are the health effects, whether it makes sense, when and whether it ever makes any sense to do a blood test. Things of those nature is what you would find in these documents, and we can certainly distribute those to anyone who's interested in them. So with that, I'll, with my other colleagues, be happy to try to answer whatever questions we can. I'm joined tonight by Dr. Tom Simmons, who is also, I believe, on, and he's our lead toxicologist for all things PFAS related. Oh, and I guess I never really introduced myself. I'm Dr. Andrew Smith. I'm the state toxicologist at the Maine CDC, and I also manage the Environmental Occupational Health Program.
I'll ask a question if I can start. So you mentioned on the PFAS, you're doing all this testing for different things. My question is, somebody that is using their well water for their gardens, and that, how is that going to affect, affect their gardens and affect the planting that they do just around their own home?
That's a good question. We actually had to do some thinking on this a couple of years ago when we encountered a community garden that had a well serving it, and that well had low levels of PFAS in it. So we've done some thinking, we've developed some action levels around that. They will obviously depend on just how high the levels are in that well water for that individual. So we're happy to have that conversation with anyone who has that concern. I'm assuming at this point that'll be mostly a next spring issue. But we're happy to have that conversation about the ability to use well water for gardening, especially for some of these wells that are testing as high as they are.
Hello?
Shelley, does that answer your question? So.
It does, thank you. I do want to thank you all for the information. I do know that having the information out there and it does, I think, will help reduce the anxiety level of the folks that have been, hearing and talking about this as we go along. So I do want to thank you for that.
Okay.
All right.
May I ask a question?
What is your favorite type of milk?
Yeah.
Pardon?
Are you going to continue to allow questions?
Fuck you.
Yeah?
We'll take a few.
Yep.
I'd like to ask a question.
Go ahead, Penny.
Severely high levels here at 34 Courier Road.
Fucking kill yourself, you fat whore.
Okay, you need to go away.
I got him.
Thank you. Normally, we make people do a sign up.
Are you still taking questions?
Yes, go ahead, Penny. Sorry about that.
I believe so. Penny.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, extremely high levels here in my area. My question for CDC is human testing seems to be, in my research, has been at much lower levels than what we are experiencing here. That and the length of time that we've been exposed to the contaminants, which we know is years. So there is certainly great concern for health issues. We've seen a lot of unexplained. My husband died 6 years ago, no pre-existing conditions, dropped dead of a heart attack. My mother has neurological neuropathy, non-diabetic. I'm disabled. I've got multiple immune system issues. One of only 5 documented cases on one of the issues that I have with the Portland allergist. They could not identify the cause, and life-altering. So my concern is remediation. We've identified several really terrible hotspots. 12,000 level. I'm close to 8,000, I believe, as a compilation. I run an aquarium, coral aquaculture facility here, and I am fortunate enough to have been, this is my second contamination experience, first MTBE in 2007. Thankfully, the DEP stepped in and they came in and remediated by putting in GAC filters, and thank God I had a reverse osmosis water filter on site. So 2014, the site was closed for MTBE. Now we're faced with this. So the DEP came in, we've done the pre-filtering water testing, so raw water testing, giving us this high numbers. We just had DEP come in and do post-testing on my 2 GACs and my RO. And I'm begging to get those results, because that's going to show all of us whether or not GAC is going to be sufficient, because we know, I just had Craig Winters of Advanced Water Quality up yesterday, and he changed out the carbon in my GAC systems. And I'm sorry, Molly, that does not cover me. All right? We need those test numbers to find out how much of the toxins are being pulled out, and especially post-RO. I have tens of thousands of dollars in livestock here, sensitive tropical animals, corals, fish from all around the world. But most of all is human health. Animals be doggoned, human health. So what I'm begging for is to expedite these test results. Find out if my GAC system and RO system works so that it can be applied, hopefully as a remedy, to the other folks around me who are suffering with this as well. Now, the idea of bringing in water, public water up from Shawmut or down from Hinckley, and for me, not acceptable. I want control over the water quality in my own home and in my facility. So I'm asking for the DEP to please step in and expedite the post-test that Chris did last week, and to get in here and do another post-test with new GAC in here. Craig and I have set my water rate. We took the numbers so that we know how much I'm using. He's getting in contact with the carbon manufacturer to find out what its removal rate is for the level of contaminants that I have. We've got to start somewhere as far as remediation, because bottled water isn't cutting it. It's not going to cover all of us, and it certainly does not make us feel good to have a plastic contaminant, and now we're forced to drink water out of a plastic bottle. So I'm sure you guys understand this. So, CDC, I'm asking you if you have any idea with our level of contamination, has there been any human studies at the levels we've been experiencing, and for the length of time we know we've been exposed to it?
Certainly from a level of exposure, yes. As I talked about at the beginning of the health effects slide, much of what we've learned about health effects has come from this, what's referred to as the C8 study in the Ohio Valley area. And that was a community that had a public water supply contaminated from a DuPont Teflon manufacturing facility, and they had levels of 2,000 to 5,000 part per trillion. So, you know, the numbers you've mentioned are in that range, although they might be on the high end of the range. What I can't speak to is the duration of exposure. I believe theirs was for some period of time. I think right now what we have is this one sampling point for here. So it's I just can't, you know, give you a scientific response for how long, but in terms of having information about people exposed at similarly high levels of P4, that I think is what the C8 study has. And I can provide you a nice link to a website if you want to see that.
Thank you. DEP, I'd like to ask, can you, Mr. Burns, can you please expedite post-testing numbers to me and get Chris back in here to do post-testing on the new GAC?
So are you saying that samples have been done post-GAC and you're waiting for those results, or are you saying you already have those results, but now you want another test based on the new GAC?
We're waiting on the post-test results. What I'm told is that it costs extra money to have them expedited. They've had them, I forget the day that Chris was in to test, but I think Molly has that date. She told me, I think it was next week before the standard delivery of the results would be in. But I'm asking for Chris to come back in and do a second post-testing between Craig from Advanced Water Quality, that's worked for the DEP closely for years, highly respected company, told me to ask for post-testing after GAC 1, post-testing after GAC 2 at my facility here, and post-testing after my RO. This will give us all an idea if a GAC system is truly going to work for the levels that we're experiencing in this area. Somebody with a 70 reading is not going to have that much difficulty extracting it from the water with simple GAC remediation. Those of us with super high levels that we have right here, it's going to take more. We know that GAC loads up, that PFAS loads up in the GAC. We know that it's very technical and hard to regenerate the GAC. So getting back, I want to see if the GAC is going to pull the high level of contamination that we have right now. So only post-testing is going to be able to tell us that, because now that I've got fresh carbon in, done by a professional, we'll see if with a 2 GAC system, if it's going to pull my level out. If it works for me, it's going to work for another residential person with lower numbers even. Reverse osmosis is always going to be everybody's go-to, okay? So everybody that's listening to this, invest in an RO. If the DEP can't get in there and help you right away, save your receipts.
So I can say a couple of things about what you've said so far. And, you know, I'm very mindful of the concerns that you have specific to your property. We are sampling a great number of wells and different media still around this site. And we are trying to balance, as we always have to balance, competing priorities. It is good that you have a GAC, I will say that. I do not know anything about the design of your GAC and whether it's adequately sized for levels that we're seeing. I think that is something that is under discussion now at the department as to approaching the design of these filters based on the levels that we're seeing. But at this time, we don't necessarily know what all of the levels and what that range is going to be. We're still out there testing right now, trying to prioritize testing of wells that we have not yet sampled to make sure that we can quickly identify for all of the residents whether or not they should be drinking their water. And when I say all of the residents, it's ones that are in the zone that we're most concerned about at this time. So we're still in a situation where we're trying to understand the extent and range of the contamination. And your issue is one of many that we're looking at. It makes it no less important, but at the same time, we are balancing priorities.
Okay.
And I'm happy to talk more with you tomorrow or the next day about this if you would like.
Sure. One last thing, though, because I want everybody to hear this. I would like to understand why we have not been declared an emergency area, that to open up super funds to be able to help deal with this situation. I understand the DEP has a limited budget, you know, funds are tight. And I don't know how you're balancing or prioritizing different situations throughout the state, but I consider our levels here pretty doggone critical.
So as far as federal action levels, they're not going to come in on this particular contaminant. Remember, we're dealing with a health advisory at this point. There's not a national standard and cleanup and remediation goals established for these emerging contaminants. Maine is far ahead of many of the other states by the work that has been done by the Maine CDC, and I can't thank Dr. Smith enough for the assistance that he's provided that's allowed us to set some of these screening levels and action levels so that we actually can come in and have something to compare against when we're evaluating sites. This doesn't exist in most other states.
Mr. Burns, are you saying PFAS don't exist in other states?
No, what I'm saying is the various screening levels and action levels associated with PFAS do not exist in many other states. As Dr. Smith indicated as part of his presentation, they have had to go in and develop several action levels and screening levels for us because they did not exist elsewhere in the country. So that's what I'm saying, is that we have some levels here that we can compare and work against that other states may not have those similar levels established.
I understand that, but I believe Vermont is down to a 20 action level in Vermont.
You're talking I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, but if the state of Maine was able to set their action level at 70, and do we really have to wait for the feds to give us, the standards? Or can we, because I've researched the heck out of this, and I've got my own conclusions, and they're not matching up with what I'm hearing, including the health risks associated with this. So can we, as a state, through the DEP, establish our own guidelines and remedies to this without having to wait for the feds to?
So one of the recommendations of the governor's PFAS task force was to look at establishing a level in drinking water that's safe. That hasn't been brought to fruition right now. That would be handled through our colleagues in the drinking water program to actually establish that. So we are working off a health advisory. And to your point of Vermont, since you raised that one, there are many other states that are setting their own levels, but that's specific to drinking water only. When I was talking about various screening levels and action levels, I was taking into account the whole universe that we're dealing with. So screening levels in soil, the levels in milk that are considered to be adulterated or contaminated if it's above a certain level. So many levels like that do not exist in other states. Each of the states that have adopted some sort of drinking water standard have adopted something based on the same basic background information. And I'm sure that Dr. Smith is cringing as I'm saying it, because I'm not saying it scientifically the way he would, but they operate off of the same data set, but interpret that data or apply variables to that data differently. So that's why you see the various levels in different states. At this point, Maine has not done that.
From my knowledge and research, and I think Mr. Smith, Dr. Smith had also mentioned that drinking water is the purest way of human contamination, probably in lower levels in the foods we eat and such. So understanding that our water wells are contaminated at the levels that we know they are, why are we not being made a priority, and especially for remediation?
I don't quite understand the why you're not being made a priority piece of the comment. Let me speak to that a little bit, because we are putting a great deal of resources towards this right now. This is a serious concern. We're expending the resources to understand what's going on. We're still in the investigating stage of understanding the extent of this situation in Fairfield. We do not know yet where the limits are. We're getting closer, but we're not there at this time. So we are doing both an investigation while we are looking at and beginning to discuss what the long-term remediation is going to be at this site. So these things are happening simultaneously.
Speak up if you want to stop it.
Okay, I think at this point in time, we've, pretty much had good coverage, stuff like that. I think we need to move to the next situation.
Mr. Chairman, we do have the contact information for all the folks that were online for tonight, and we will make sure that that slide is made available to people
Yes.
with this video.
Yeah.
So folks who watch it later, as well as the fact that we can make sure that it is posted to our website and those sort of things, so that folks
Right.
can have the opportunity to speak with.
Right.
I'm sure as we go through this, folks will have more questions.
Now, do we have any more from DEP? Nancy McBrady?
Nope, that she was first.
Or, I'm sorry, Molly King, rather.
And Molly works at DEP with Mr. Burns, and Molly's the one that's here in town. So we have her contact information,
Great.
as well as everybody else that spoke
Yeah.
this evening. So Molly King is the face of what most of the residents in the community are seeing, and we thank her for her work that she's been doing, so.
Right. No, it's a tough situation, but, unfortunately, there's not, from a town level, a lot that we can do other than trying to bring everybody together with DEP and move on and get this handled and, stay on top of it. Steph?
Does Valerie Ireland have a question?
She just might be the last person that actually spoke when we went on to this. It's just not showing up with the council screen isn't showing up on
Okay.
on our television screen. That's not what folks at home are seeing.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else that anybody has here?
I just wonder about the soil contamination,
I'm
The
sorry.
what?
the soil, because I know there's water contamination. You must have soil contamination too.
Yeah, I mean, again, that would be something to ask them, but I, from what I could see, is that soil pretty much stays the same. It doesn't,
I'm just wondering about the absorption too on this.
yeah.
You get it absorb it too through your skin.
Yeah, that part I don't,
They mentioned in their presentation about the soils that they have tested in
Yeah.
those locations. And Dr. Smith had mentioned the fact that, showering wasn't an issue. It's more of the ingestion piece.
right. In other words, you can take a shower, you can, things like
I'm not sure
that.
about a person having the cut, absorption that way. And the smell, maybe it's the smell of it too.
Yeah, don't know.
So-
That's something that you would take where the contact is at, and
So one of the things we can do, as well as the PowerPoint presentations, the slides that we had here at the meeting tonight, we can also make sure that those are available for folks
Yep.
to see and be able to have that information firsthand. Okay.
And again, the person asking that question could reach out directly to me, and I'd be happy to talk about what we know about soil, what we know about uptake or exposure pathways associated with that from soil exposure routes.
All right.
okay.
Could I ask one more question? Maybe this is something the council could answer. How is this going to affect our property values or the property values of the people in the center?
I have no answer for that. Not at present time. They're working, I think, to correct the situation is one of the things, and just go from there. One of the things that we have been talking about is to possibly, we have to look into it much deeper, but it's because it's going to be very expensive, but is to extend our city public water, extend our water out to those particular homes.
You gotta do the whole, you gotta do the whole center. You gotta do the whole center.
Well, it would have to
From
be.
Ridge Road, right up to Green.
Yeah,
and-
oh, yeah, yeah,
And that's expensive.
yeah, it would be, but there's,
And it's more taxes to on the residents.
not if we look at it, we've been looking at it, talking about possible grants and things like that, so that's what we're divulging into also.
Okay.
Anything else? Yeah, if present time. It's, I mean, it's just under, and we have all the contacts, all the information, the phone numbers, et cetera, and we're just going to have to work with what we've got. And, you know, this is something that's been around for 20-plus years. And, you know, we're just now finding out about it, so it's something that has to be worked on.
And thank you to the folks from the state for being here this evening to share this information with the community. It's really great that folks were able to hear it firsthand, straight from you. Sometimes when we're dealing with just emails and phone calls, it's really nice to be able to put a face with a name. So hopefully the residents that are watching this evening or watch it in the future will be able to reach out and contact you with any questions they have, as well as contacting us here at the town office if you need help facilitating getting those questions put through. We're here for that as well. So thank you very much, folks, for being on tonight to speak with us.
Yeah, and I know we also have Senator. Also, I know Senator Searway was also involved, was on the Zoom meeting himself, listening to all of this, so he's taking all of that into consideration, and he's becoming involved with the whole situation also.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can I ask a question or so?
Sure.
I had spoken, I believe, to you, Mr. Burns, earlier, and you was talking about maybe testing at other towns, and also I'm concerned for Goodwill Hinckley as well, as because they do gardening, and they should be tested. But so we want to find out where the source is coming from. Apparently, it may be from the waste site, Unity Plantation, maybe. But we need to find that out, I think, and then maybe get an ombudsman or somebody that's an in-between person to help the victims as we find them, and see what we can do. For maybe they have insurance that covers for what they've done for these people. So I think that's a very important piece. So if the sooner we can get that done, the better.
Absolutely. No, I think that's...
We are in the process, I think as you're aware, of looking at other sites where KSTD material may have been placed based on the records we have. And at this point, we don't have any information yet about those sites, but we're actively working on it. So I hear what you're saying, and I'll make a note of the ombudsman concept, and we'll talk about that internally.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Searway.
And thank you for having us tonight.
Thank you for coming on and giving us a good, good solid come through of what's going on and what's happening, and hopefully we'll be able to move quickly and fastly and as we can and get this thing under control. Thank you for all your help.
All right. Well, no further questions for us. I'm going to sign off and let you continue on with your meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you as well.
Thank you. Okay. We will move on. Actually, we'll move on to the first order of business. All right. First order of business is public announcements. Now, details may be found at www.fairfieldme.com. And just to note, in December, Council will begin reviewing appointment applications for upcoming volunteer positions on local boards and committees, including the following: Budget Committee, Planning Board, Land Use Board of Appeals, Economic Development Committee, Board of Assessment Review, Voter Registration Board of Appeals, Charter Commission Review. And if you are interested in serving your community, please complete an appointment application form available on our websites or at the town office. Appointments are made at the town council's January annual organizational meeting. Number 2, Non-emergency town services will be closed on November 26th and 27th in observance of Thanksgiving holiday. Second order of business would be public hearings, of which we have none scheduled. Third order of business is public comments. There is a limit of 3-minute equivalent to public speaking. Members of the public may email comments for council at info@fairfieldme.com by 4 p.m. the day of the meeting on any topic or agenda item. Items may be read aloud at this time.
I did not receive any.
Not receive any, okay. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on anything?
I'd like to say something about getting city water out.
Yeah.
Right up to the
Come right up to the microphone.
And if you could state your name, please?
Stanna McLeod.
Thank you.
We can get water, but that's not going to solve the fact that the land is contaminated. And they're saying this is a forever contamination. So there's no fix. And this is my second round of this. I live on Pirate Lane. And we went through this all years ago. And now we're there again.
Yep. I don't know that there's, as far as the land or anything, I mean, there hasn't been any studies done. That's what the DEP, you probably are better off talking to them to see if there's any,
Well, it's obvious they dumped on land behind me for years.
Yeah.
And it's obvious.
Again, it may fall back on the people that made this sludge, the companies.
It already did back in the 80s.
Right, and it may fall back on
There were
them.
class actions.
So that's, but that's something that would have to be done. Okay. All right, fourth order of business, reports from staff and committees. Town manager report.
So you received my monthly report, had for you, and I did give you an updated on a couple of bit of fact sheets regarding this updates with what's been going on at the town office with DEP and things we've been working on. But other than that,
yeah,
everything else that I've worked on this week, we're going to be discussing later on in the meeting, so I don't have any details for you.
Town clerk election report.
Hi. So I'd like to just start with everything about this election and year has been quite unprecedented, as everyone knows, and breaking of all records. When I give you the statistics, they're all elevated for the norm. So the current number of registered and enrolled voters as of November 3rd, and this is a changing number as the other towns go through and pull anybody that moved out before the election or on election day, is 4,647. That's the highest number we've ever seen.
Yeah.
It will fluctuate and change, and that's why your report tonight does say draft, because I have to wait until all the deadlines have been met by the state to actually pull the final numbers. So I wanted to just clarify that reason. For the voters casting ballots for the presidential election, it was 3,421 voters, and for the municipal election, 3,402 voters, for a turnout of 73.61%, again, based on the numbers we have currently. Absentees, record number, it was 1,865 requests with 1,796 returned, 61 not returned by election day. Some of those were people that actually didn't tell us that they wanted to cancel their absentee and come vote in person. I don't have those numbers yet because we haven't been given permission by the state to do our voter participation history report yet. We have to wait for all the 500 municipalities to reconcile their absentees before we can move forward on that. There were absentees that were rejected formally. There were 8 in the course. Throughout the course of all this, there were many voter registration and absentee back and forth trying to get folks that had missing information up to date so that those aren't necessarily reflected in the numbers as far as the hundreds of transactions following up with voters in advance of the election. For voter registration, I included both election day and then the election period between the last election to this election because it shows what was taking place that is specific to this election. So the voter changes on Election Day were 197 new voters added to Fairfield, and pre-election 341, and the changes to current voters on Election Day was 59, and then pre-election 175, and the number of canceled and moved out. The reason there is an Election Day number, that's the number of people, 67 people have been removed from the municipality as of Election Day to other municipalities that as their work, it's a number that will change every day. And then the pre-election number was 185. So that's a huge number, and it couldn't have been done without the collaboration with the deputies, tons of phone calls, tons of follow-up, but that's a lot of transactions, so I just wanted to make note of that. We surpassed any and all records again in that area. Spoiled ballots, again, surpassed all records in the spoiled ballot category. Usually it's related to ranked choice voting, but some of it did have to do with people not reading absentee instructions and using a Sharpie that bled through and then made the ballot unreadable. So noteworthy for this election, there's quite a few things. We did apply for and receive a $5,000 grant that supported funding for the personnel and safety requirements that were extensive. So that was a much needed windfall for us in order to have the staffing to make everything run as compliantly as it needed to with all those state restrictions that were put upon us. The secure drop box, that was a wonderful piece, having the state reimburse us for that substantially. We wound up only paying for shipping. And that garnered us the efficiencies of batch processing and no contact returns for the voter, so that provided safety for both them and the employees in the town office. The addition of 2 tabulators, we've been asking, as you know, I've been asking every year since we received the DS200s to get 2 more, and they finally arrived a week or so prior to the election, and we used them in early processing and for Election Day. And this was our #1 item that was well complimented all day long. We get complimented every election and complaints every election, but that was complimented all day long, the addition of the 2 new tabulators and how much that moved our lines much more quickly and efficiently. We were very pleased about that. We're very grateful that that happened. The state mandated social distancing and sanitization requirements worked very well, having that additional personnel at the front of the building and in the building, guiding voters, cleaning in between voters. It was a well-oiled machine as we got the day underway. Much of the training took place during early processing. We were kind of using a double duty there because everything gets so busy at the end with the volume we were dealing with, and everyone did great. We had amazing folks step up. The extension of the absentee deadlines and the high turnout did lead to having to do the early processing. That was facilitated, and that went very, very well. We did see a lot of returns on Election Day, and that is more difficult to navigate because we have to stop, enter them in, receive them into the system, then we have to check them in on the incoming voter list. There's a report that has to be run. There's a certain process. We have to offer inspection to the political parties that were present as poll watchers. So that's pretty substantial, but it went very well, and the poll watchers were great. They understood. We took the opportunity to let them ask questions if they needed. It was the first election for several people, so it went very, very well. And with the personnel limitations for our folks that had conflicts of interest or health concerns, I did want to give accolades. We had a lot of people that stepped up, very competent people that could meet the requirements of the various stations we were short on, and we were very fortunate to have some folks that took time out of their already busy day or work schedule to accommodate this election, and knowing that there were people that couldn't work. And I want to say thank you for all of our regular election workers as well as those that stepped up that were new. We're incredibly grateful for all the hard work. And then the other piece is elections, as you know, is a multi-town department situation where everybody steps in. In an election of this magnitude, no one can do this by themselves. It's a huge undertaking. And there isn't a single department for this town that did not somehow help or participate or lend a hand. The library folks did so much advertising and sorting and helped us with mailing and taping. Public Works, of course, setting up, tearing down. There was a lot of additional requirements for this election. They helped with Crossroads TV station. Chad, every time I'm in this building, Chad, can you help me with this? Can I borrow your dolly? Just everywhere, everywhere. And the deputies took a lot of the brunt at the tax counter. It was huge, monumental, a lot of calls, people frustrated with the process, a lot of misinformation that takes place, a lot of political party flyers that confuse voters. I just can't say enough how much, I can't sing the praises or accolades of how much every person in this town stepped up to help out with this task. You know, we had police and fire, every single department. I'm very proud, I'm very honored, I'm very humbled to continue to preserve the integrity of the election process, and truly grateful that this election was another successful and competent and compliantly run election. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and I want to thank to all of the people that contributed, all of the departments, et cetera, and particularly thank you for being able to coordinate it all and get them all into the same bucket.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Any committee? Yes, Stephanie.
For the Economic and Community Development Council, I met twice with Garvin Donegan and Sabrina Jandrow from the Central Maine Growth Council, and we are creating a survey that will be going on our website, hopefully in January. In December, the committee's going to meet, and we're going to ask for input on the survey, and everybody will have a chance to add or tell us what they think, so that come January, people can go on our website and participate in the survey. And it's basically so that we will have a focus and know where to look for grants and where we should focus our attention on as a town. Just an update.
Okay. Anything else from any other committees? Nope. Okay. Well, there being none, we'll move to the fifth order of business, which is our consent agenda. Now, these items are considered routine or standard business and therefore will be enacted by one motion, unless a council member requests that the item be removed and acted as a regular action item on the agenda. The first item is item 20-143, in order that the Fairfield Town Council hereby waives the reading of and accepts the minutes for the meeting of 2020-20 held on October 14th, 2020. Item 20-144, ordered that the Town Council hereby approves the Treasurer's Warrant number 29, General Fund, in the amount of $1,036,742.73, which is the MSAD 49, Motor Vehicle, Paving, Central Maine Growth Council, CMP, PW 2020 Vehicle, and cardiac monitors.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. Moving to the sixth order of business. Take action on the following items of business. Item 20-145. Ordered that the Town Council hereby signs a quitclaim deed, covenant deed for property located on the industrial road to amend a quitclaim deed with the covenant deed recorded in Somerset County Registry of Deeds, Book 5176, page 156, dated May 2nd, 2017, to relocate the land to be used as a road on property donated to and accepted by the town on December 14th, 2016.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Questions? Yes, sir.
Can I just get a quick synopsis of the situation, just briefly, so I have a handle on what this is exactly is?
Would you like me to explain?
Please.
So, there was an awful lot of detail in this that really didn't explain anything.
You know that.
But in December of 2016, Doug Cutchins presented the town of Fairfield with a piece of land to extend the PAL ball fields. So it's off the back end down by where the soccer field is. With that came the land that was needed to extend the industrial road so it meets up with the other end in Waterville, over by the VFW.
Okay.
Okay? Since this all happened back in 2016, 2017, the property owner, Mr. Guimon, who owns most all of this land that's in between the Waterville city line and this property, is putting in a solar application in his land that's out there. And this road, the way it had been originally deeded, put it right smack down through the middle of his property. This is shifting it north towards the interstate, but below the wetlands, so it won't impact the wetlands that are up there. So we'll still have the land that we need to extend the road. It's just moving its location. Okay, and one of the other things I needed to update council on today, there's a pit out in there that they were going to be using to bury the stumps and put some material in, so to help level that off to make it easier for fields. However, we discovered yesterday, and I actually personally looked at it this morning when it was 27 degrees outside, approximately at minimum 100 tires. So if folks remember, this land, Doug Cutchins spent thousands of dollars, and there were many tractor trailer loads of tires that were taken out of that location because there was a tire company that had used it as an illegal dumping location. Yep. So these are located behind a berm, kind of tucked away, and they're right on the property line. So we haven't done anything with it today, but we're investigating on what we need to do with that. So we will have access to that area once the solar company comes in and puts in the access road, because right now it'll be very difficult to put a piece of equipment back there. And we'll start having some conversation with folks about how we can get rid of these tires.
I was going to say, what about the tire?
Well, and that's who we need to start talking to, which is
Tire
EDS
company,
Tire.
yeah.
But we were not aware that these were there.
Right.
In fact, I actually talked to Mr. Cutchins this morning.
Okay.
He was not aware that they were there. And I've talked to the surveyors, so so we're working on that.
So the road will be on the other side of the Pal soccer field, or?
So the map was sent in your packet. I don't know.
The last page.
Yeah, it's your last page. So basically, it's difficult to see, but the land is here, and now the road's moving up here. The PAL fields are actually over off to the side of this map.
Going toward the interstate and
then straight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I see a trail up there already.
Right. And, from an economic standpoint, that's very important too, because that is a cut that gets through right where it's needed.
And one of the pieces, when they came to me and told me that they were looking at doing this, because they also had to go back to the planning board to amend their conditional use permit because of this road. That was one of the pieces that we really wanted to make sure of, was that, because there are actually some wetlands that are close to the interstate, and we really needed to make sure that our access stayed so that it was outside of the interstates right away, and we weren't going to find that we were only going to have a road that could be built through the middle of a swamp. So they made sure that there's at least a 150-foot buffer between this road location and those wetland areas. So it was good.
Okay.
Thank you.
We need a motion?
You have it.
We have a motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Anything else? All in favor? All right, that carries 100%. Moving on to item 20-146. Ordered that the town council hereby authorizes the town manager to sign a lease amendment and estoppel agreement between the town of Fairfield and the HEP Energy USA LLC.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Where do we stand on that?
Okay. So
I read the emails. I'm a little, looks a little vague.
So we basically have got, so what this is that this is for the solar project that's on the town's landfill. And some items have come up in regards to a lending institution for this project, and items that they need to have clarified, and also changes that have happened within, some of this is within tax law in the last few years. Remember when we started working at this and putting this together also in 2016, 2017, in the very beginning, a lot of the laws surrounding solar installation projects didn't exist. So some things have come up. So the estoppels are basically the municipality stating the fact that, you know, HEP is not indebted to us, they don't owe us any money, which they don't, and all of those things. So that was pretty easy. It did come back with a stipulation that the premises would now be considered personal property and not real estate. And there are some pretty specific clauses in our lease that dealt with that. So this is to amend that. Most recently, there's been a conference call with the folks from HEP and Tangent and Bill Lee, the town's attorney, and we're pretty close to exactly what this amendment needs to be. So the gist of it is that it does now make it so that it is considered personal property, not real estate. The tax laws that are in the state that are in place right now are the same for both, so it doesn't make any difference when it comes to that. What it does make a difference to is that with personal property, the liens don't get filed and they're not automatically foreclosing tax liens. But there are methods in which you can collect taxes for personal property. We have them in place already, they do exist. And then the other piece that we had realized was that there actually was not the option for the municipality to terminate the lease should the development not happen. HEP had that option, but the municipality didn't. It was just a complete oversight, so it is correcting some of that language as well. It does extend the development term an additional year. Right now, they only had 2, and they're already into it for 1 year, so it does put that out to 3 years, so it does give an extra term. But one of the reasons this came up, which is the termination piece, is it isn't something that any of us ever talked about in the beginning. We were so excited about this happening and this project was going to happen. But one of the things that is happening across the state is there are companies out there that are leasing land to prevent their competition from using it for solar projects. That is not what we think is happening here. That's not where we're at. But we also know that the folks sitting at the table today and the folks sitting on the other side of the table today might not be the folks that are sitting there a year or 2 from now. And this is to make sure that the municipality is protected regardless of who the current players are. Yep. So what I would like to actually ask you to do in the most recent email that I gave you this evening is Bill suggested, because we are really close on this, it's just some wording pieces, is that you would amend this motion that you just made so that it would also be subject to the review and approval of the town attorney for its form. Just so what happens is that we are not preventing them from moving forward and holding this up for another council meeting, and we'll have the ability to get this worked out in the next couple of days to a week or so and get this taken care of.
Okay. So then what I would look for is on the motion that we've got is just add a sentence that simply says, as per approval of the town attorney.
Because I thought I read my email, it says the tax exemption. That's what I thought. I read in my email on the spell, a tax exemption.
So the law that has been created by the state of Maine allows solar projects that either use the power for themselves or net meter the power to claim a renewable energy credit tax exemption. That is absolutely correct. They were allowed to be tax exempt. The state currently reimburses the municipality 50%, is the way the law is written. There's a stipulation that's going into this lease. There's some new wording that's in there that should those laws change again, we have the ability to have a conversation with the owner. So, for instance, the solar project that's already built that's up near Goodwill Hinckley on 201 on your way to the interstate, that project is 100% tax exempt because it delivers power to the town of Freeport. We will be reimbursed 50% of its taxation piece. So, and like I said, that's a relatively new law. It came into place in 2019, and it is the same for real estate classifications or personal property classifications. There's nothing around that.
So I have a question. Are the solar panels themselves considered personal property?
So there's, originally what we had done is we had declared it that it was considered real estate for taxation purposes. Okay. Is what we had originally said. So it was clarified in the lease. This now changes that so that is considered personal property. And the way, and the reason for that is typically real estate is something that is actually affixed to the land. But if you think about a mobile home, which isn't technically anchored to the land, that is still considered real estate. But it could also be taxed as personal property. It depends on what each municipality chooses to do. So what this is happening is this personal property piece is really what started all of this. And this is a big deal for the financing entity about what this is classified as. So this is just resetting what that precedence is.
So as a municipality, we can't obtain taxes for the quote personal property.
So the way it works right now, the way the law is it doesn't matter. The law is exactly the same, written exactly the same under exemptions for real estate as it is under exemptions for personal property. It makes no difference whatsoever what the classification is.
Thank you.
They're losing it, we want to get 50% of it, not rather than 100%.
That's correct.
Because that's going to be like looking at 5 properties of solar pretty soon. Going to be
5 projects.
5 projects, losing tax money.
Well, you have to understand the 50% that we will receive for the state is a lot more than what we're currently getting for the vacant land anyway. So it's still more than what we would have normally received.
Well, that would be the silver lining.
Yes.
Right. That's right.
Especially like the landfill, we're getting 0 on that now.
Yeah.
Right.
So 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing.
That's yearly. That's a yearly thing.
It is yearly, so the property taxes are annual. Plus, with this project, part of your packet was the lease, which is a rather large document. Once the solar project is built, the municipality will also receive basically rent per acre on the landfill itself. So we will receive that as well. So we'll actually, once it gets from the development stage into the actual operational stage, there's a land lease payment that gets paid to us. That's where we're at right now. We're at it's about the $2,000 mark. What will happen is this then in turn will turn over to, I think it's $425 an acre, which is actually the going rate for this type of land. There was an actual appraisal that was done. It had to be done. For your information, Mark, when this first started, this project was done in conjunction with this very similar project in Waterville with the same exact company. And what made life a lot easier for us is that the city of Waterville and the town of Fairfield share the same exact attorney. So what we did is we actually split the legal expenses on this, and the leases were worked and written the same. Everything was done the same. The land lease amounts were the same. We worked through all of that, and it made life a lot simpler for everyone because we all know what we were talking about. There's also an additional document that goes along with this that's an operational agreement that says what the company will be responsible for after this is done. Because currently, the municipality is in charge of all its testing parameters and as well as bush hogging the land every year and that sort of stuff. And that now will actually, the land coverage and stuff will default to HEP themselves. They will be responsible for maintaining the property. Because it is still a landfill, regardless, the municipality is still responsible for making sure that the landfill is monitored properly and cared for properly. DEP has been very involved with this project. And because of the fact that they were 2 separate locations, it made life, there were 2 towns, but we kind of went through stuff at the same time. It made life a lot easier. So, and solar on landfills is, while when we started this was something that was just beginning to happen, is actually starting to happen all over the state. There's a lot of folks that are doing this. And it works out really well because, like Councilor Taylor said, something is better than nothing on land that is otherwise not usable for anything else.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I'd like to amend my motion to add the following to it. Subject to the review and approval of the town attorney as to form.
Need a second?
Second.
Okay. All right, any more discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Thank you.
Carries both. All right, the seventh order of business, which is council workshop and other business. Number one on the seventh order of business is to discuss proposed revisions to the public safety ordinance, parking on Cottage Street. Chief?
Pardon me, I think you have a most recent list of the speeds on that road.
Yes, we do.
As you recall, I was going to shut off the radar sign and still have it continue to collect data.
Yeah.
It sure looks like I did that on the 11th. Because the speed violations went from 7, 14, 9, and 5 to over 20 on each day. For the amount of vehicles that are going through and the amount of violations, it's not abnormally high. The speeds are high for those streets. You know, the top speeds are very high for those streets, but not abnormal for other streets in town. They're in the same area that other 25-mile-an-hour speed zones would be in. I'll put the sign up in some 25s and 35 and some 45, and I don't normally calculate out all of the data. I put the sign out there more to calm the traffic, which is what it's designed to do.
Exactly.
But the speeds are about average. Speeds that are, you know, some 35 and 45 mile-an-hour streets, we will see, I've seen numbers as high as 99 on a 45. And it's not uncommon for our officers to charge people with criminal speed, which is exceeding 30 over the posted speed limit. So that does occur. It's not frequent, but it's not uncommon. So as far as these numbers are concerned, the speeds are a little bit higher. I'll notify the officers to see if they can pay a little bit more attention in that area. As far as the parking issue is concerned, I haven't seen any vehicles parked on the roadway, and I don't know that it's because of the construction that was taking place on the street or not. But when I have gone through the area, I don't recall seeing any vehicles parked.
There was a couple the other day that were, you know, pretty much had one lane shut down. They were parked in front of a house, and they had the lane shut down. If two cars would have passed at the same time, there's no way it would have happened.
Was that when they were working on those steps?
No, actually it wasn't. It was I think it was yesterday, actually. But, you know, I did notice too, when you had your speed thing up there.
Yes.
When it's alive, traffic is much slower than when you shut it off entirely.
Yes. And that's the reason we shut it off, is to see what what the actual flows are. And I always get calls saying the speed sign is dead, the speed sign is dead. Yeah. It's not dead, it's just silent and collecting data. However, in this case, it did die. Yeah. And it was silent and collecting data, and we didn't know. So I only got, 3 or 4 days worth of data on the street.
Yeah, that's all right.
That is something that the officers, I can notify them of, and they'll come in and make their presence known.
Yeah, there's only one section on the parking that is coming up over the hill there. There's a small area there that if there's a car parked there, and somebody goes around it coming down, there could be a...
I am familiar with that area, and I believe one of the crashes that we had on the road was at that location and involved a vehicle parked there. I think there were charges involved in that as well. So I guess my question to council is this. The safety committee met the other day. They identified another location that was having a parking issue. 2 of the members, myself and PW Director Williams, went by, and of course there were no violations there. Right. So we agreed that we would keep an eye on the road to see if the violations continued, but however we thought, an outreach to the business, if I showed up at the business and spoke to them to see if they would, if we could get some voluntary compliance in that location, we thought that would be the best direction to go in that location. I'm wondering from you as council members, do you think that is something that I should do in this location as well?
I wouldn't mind that. I think that would be a good situation, good idea. I mean, I would actually like to see a sign up there that says no parking on the pavement, because there's plenty of room on the grass and the front lawns for people to park, and, but Actually coming up too, I don't believe that they can park once the plowing starts, or what, isn't there a specific
Correct.
date that nobody can park out there anyway?
During the evening hours, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for snow removal.
Right. But actually, you know, and you're right, it has tremendously declined the amount of cars that were parking, because before the roads were ever done, there was always a ton of cars out there. And it really has cut way, way back as far as people actually parking out there anymore.
That could also be an abnormality, but I will continue to check the area from time to time. I usually come in quite early, so I see if vehicles are out there early in the morning.
Right.
I head home, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the only concern I really have there is the aspect of nasty collision.
Okay.
Type of situation, yeah. Just more of a public safety thing than it is, you know.
Yeah, and I like the idea of talking with the people first and keeping an eye on things as time moves on. So I think that's a good plan.
I will meet with them this week, and I will let the town manager know, and if there are any more concerns, reach out to her, and she will let me know, and we'll get it back on the agenda.
Super.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A quick question for you. Do you know of any other streets in the town currently that there may be parking issues on? So, I mean, we can look at this in mass rather than just, you know, picking these off one by one?
No, I really don't. We do have some, you know, some violations, left wheel to curb here and there. Not a lot of complaints recently that I can think of. I can research it, but I don't recall hearing very many of them. And I don't really think it's, I don't think it's needed to like do a comprehensive review of the entire town and try to, you know, reestablish all of the parking.
Yeah.
If that's what you're asking.
Well, rather than, you know, save a lot of time to look at those that may be an issue rather than picking off one at a time, and, you know, if there are other out there that come to mind, I'd rather take them all into consideration at one time rather than, okay, in 2 years, we're looking at another street to do this on.
I assume I can start making parking violation complaints available to the safety committee. And maybe we can start taking a look at it that way. And because we meet every 3 months, maybe we can start compiling a list and seeing where that goes. And
see if we have some trouble areas.
Maybe doing a presentation once a year, unless there's an immediate action that's needed.
Yeah, absolutely.
We could absolutely do that.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, the only other thing up there, which I think possibly Michelle can give us an answer on, is that on the top end of Cottage Street too, we still don't have a no-through truck sign yet.
It's on order, though. We just don't have it
Because we
yet.
got one at the bottom.
Yeah.
It's the top one where we haven't
Up
had
top.
any trucks go down through there, so, that I'm aware of.
Yeah, but it is on order, and like all things, because of COVID, it just takes longer to get everything.
Gotcha.
So, but it is.
Okay. Very good, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
All right, second order of business, discuss comprehensive plan, financial, resources, and agricultural and forestry.
Okay. Ready?
Go for it.
All right. For financial resources, it's really, this whole area is basically about keeping Fairfield in a good financial condition with low debt and sound financial management. And the town council is committed to working to lower taxation with respect to the municipal budget and seek innovative and sustainable solutions to that end. Since 2014, we have made a very good concerted effort to keep our tax bills lower. And in spite of rising insurances and payrolls increasing, just, like this year's tax bill is still lower than it was last year, both. So it's an ongoing area. We are seeking new commercial development, as in the solar panels, and we're always looking for opportunities. We've talked greatly about the 201 corridor, and other things will continue. So the second part, overall, we're doing good. I gave this whole section in check pluses. And on agriculture and forestry, it's so ironic that we're talking about this now.
I know.
Considering what the first part of our meeting was about. So when it comes time for the rewrite on the comprehensive plan, I think we really need to take a good look, because Fairfield was founded because of its agricultural means, and who knows where this is going to take us in the days to come, but it's an area that should be really looked at when the rewrite does happen, because my heart goes out to the farmers and to the residents. We're just beginning to see this. So this whole section of the comprehensive plan does need to be reworded. The planning board, it's an ongoing thing, and how we're using our land, and they've been working digital, I can't even say the word.
Diligently.
Thank you. Digital, well, whatever.
Digitally, they've been.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
got to be the mask. So it does mention the Maine Farmland Trust and local land trusts, and I don't think we've ever been able, or since 2014, ever done anything with them. Of more importance, though, is the working with the DEP and the Department of Agriculture, and making sure we have good lines of communication. And it's not just us as a council, but it also has to be the residents as well. And I'm so pleased to see the involvement of those that spoke today. Again, this whole area, unless somebody has anything else to say, needs to have a good look at when we get ready to do the rewrite.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
Just to update you a little bit, there is a section in here that's very specific, and it's regarding the forest management plan for the town's properties.
oh, yeah.
Because it's not, this says for the town farm, but it's not, we don't have a forest management plan just for the town farm. We have a couple other properties that we do that with. And just so you're aware, if you weren't, or to at least update our new council members, we actually work with a forester at Sappi. They help us manage these properties. Their forester is who does our forest management plan for us. And when it's time for harvesting, we do that. And when there is harvesting done, it does generate revenue for us, and that goes to the town's general fund when trees are harvested. So just so you're aware, we do have that.
Yeah.
And then back to the financial piece, it should be noted that there's been a lot of work done in the last several years regarding the capital improvement program for the municipality. That has become a really big focus for the council and the budget committee when we're doing and reviewing budgets. And it's going very well, whereas we're starting to actually build reserve accounts for these things so that it's not a huge detriment to folks' taxes when we do need things like new dump trucks or new police cruisers. And the other piece is, working with the water district and the sewer department about expansion needs and financing expansions. Before all of this, we were actually having those conversations for different pieces, because remember, we were looking at the 201 corridor, and they have looked at it in other locations as well in the community. But those communications have become rather extensive in the last couple of weeks about various different pieces and components of expansion of those utilities. So just those kind of things.
Thanks, Michelle. And in case you didn't realize it, on the map that shows the forestry part Fairfield, it's quite impressive to see how much of Fairfield is considered forestry and versus farmland.
Right.
And it's shown well in the appendix. So In December, we'll be talking more about the capital investment planning. We'll do the part 2 on the land use plan, and the capital investment is part 3, and then regional coordination is part 4, and we'll wrap this up. And maybe we can get Mr. Violet to take a look at the language that's in those sections and give us a little update on how things are going. And it can be written as
For the planning
Nicole
board.
has done, right?
Yeah.
And Bangor Savings is who we are working with for our investments. And, no, I can't remember who it is. It's somebody new.
It's First National.
Thank you, First National. And will we be getting a report at year's end?
Yes, so we've actually started having that conversation. What was happening is that how your agendas had been stacked and the various different topics you had going, it just was a piece that we hadn't done at the time. Originally, they were scheduled to come at a time frame when we were down to 4 council members, and we didn't have a full council, so we figured we'd wait, do that presentation once we knew we had a full council, and now that we're here. So obviously, it would be done via Zoom, so we'll get that set up for you. If it's not a meeting next month, it'll be right after the first of the year. So.
All right, I was just curious.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Third, under 7th order of business, is discuss December council meeting schedule. And the only thing I'd like is, we could easily handle one meeting in December, and I'd like to move it to the middle of the month to like December 16th. But that's just a suggestion.
First and third. Does the third week fall out?
The 3rd is the
Christmas.
Christmas week.
Oh, bah humbug.
That's the week before Christmas.
Yeah, so currently, your meetings are scheduled for December 9th and December 23rd.
Right. And
So this would put it on the
that would
16th.
move just move it to one meeting and go to December 16th is what.
One of the other things I would like you to discuss this evening, many municipalities have started making it so that their meetings are no longer in person at all. The city of Augusta, the city of Waterville voted last night, Skowhegan voted yesterday. Most of them around us have gone back to Zoom while the COVID numbers are elevated. Especially considering how difficult it is for us to sit here and have a conversation with each other with masks on. If you were at home doing that, you would be back to there. So just another piece for you to consider, because that is happening all over the state. And then in regards to COVID too, just a little bit of a piece, one of the big things that has happened in the last 2 weeks is the Public Works Director, as well as surrounding Public Works Directors in the region, have started working on a plan for mutual aid, because if we're in the middle of a snowstorm and we have a COVID outbreak, that means we have no snowplow drivers. So they are working on a plan in which we would ensure that every municipality has coverage if that happens. They're partnering on, we would send one person, another town would send one person, and that sort of piece. And they're just working out the logistical insurance details, that kind of stuff of that. But that's a very good proactive thing that these folks are working on.
Nice.
And it's not being done anywhere, and it's kind of really exciting to watch them go through that process. But staff really are doing what they can to try to make sure that we are staying as safe as possible. There was a safety meeting today. COVID was a big part of their conversation for staff and what they're doing to make sure that we can limit exposure if anybody does get exposed, considering we did have one of our officers at the police academy when they had the recent outbreak. We do have employees who have had children who have been exposed and various family members. We do know there's been exposures at the school. The county buildings have been shut down yesterday for the next 2 weeks. So it's getting closer and closer to us. So we're working very hard to make sure we're prepared for that. And just wanted to give you that quick update.
And that's up to whatever the consensus is of the council type of thing. We do have which we don't know exactly how soon it's going to be available, but we do have a vaccine that is coming up.
And you can make that decision actually before your next meeting. You know, whenever you decide to actually do that next meeting, I can easily send a quick poll to folks. And of course, remember, if any council member isn't comfortable coming to the meeting, the ability to vote electronically is still in place. So
Right.
folks would still have the opportunity to be at home to attend, so.
So that's up to the council members.
Okay, okay.
A month away, it's a long ways away.
Yep. Okay.
So is the consensus that you're going to switch to just one meeting in
Yeah,
December?
I'm good
Is that
with
where
that.
you're at?
Unless something comes up, I don't see a major issue with that.
My big thing would be the water situation, you know, if things, if whatever
Right.
develops requires our attention.
Right, obviously.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way we did it when we did the November one as
Right.
well. The November one, we decided a long time ago, but we've done that before in the past, that if you need to meet, we'll call the meeting for you to meet.
Yep.
There will be warrants that will need to be done in December as well, especially because it's year end. It's not our fiscal year end, but it is calendar
Right, so
year end,
you'll
so
have to
there's
come
quite a
into
few
that.
quarterly things that will have to happen, but the office will be in touch with folks when that
Yeah,
warrant needs to be signed.
Right.
Call him, so
Yep.
fine.
No problem.
Okay.
All right.
Number 4, discuss other council business. I'll start with Stephanie.
I have,
What?
I don't
What?
have much
No.
to say. Well, actually, I do.
I knew we could drag it out of you.
I just want to say that the people that are being affected by the contamination in the wells, be patient with us, and as was stated earlier, if you're in need of water, arrangements are being made, and if something doesn't, if you don't get your water, don't hesitate to call the town office. Our information might be inaccurate. So again, patience, we're all in this together, and we'll make it through.
Very, very well said, Stephanie.
Thank you, Michael.
Other than repeating what Stephanie said, I have nothing for this evening.
Mark?
Well said, sir.
Peter?
I'm just wondering, since with this contamination going on in the Ohio here area, are we going to relook or table the town farm road housing development for right now until the contamination is ceased?
You didn't have anything going on actively with that project anyway, other than we were just looking for grant funding.
Okay.
And clearly, the portions of the plan that included private wells is certainly completely off the table at this point, so that's not even an option. So it was helpful for DEP that you had that feasibility study done, because that gave them an idea of what the cost was going to be to actually put water up 201, and that has aided them in their discussions and how they've worked through their process about what a solution could be. So it wasn't all for naught that we did it, but definitely it's one of those things where wells wouldn't be an option at this point, I don't believe. So I don't believe they've done any testing at that location. It is a bit further away from where the current fields that they are testing, but they're aware that we have a piece of property in there, yeah.
Okay. And then the only thing that I've, just looking at this whole mess that we've got too, is we probably, and I know we discussed it in that, but we need to take a look at the properties out there that have been affected and possibly have them redone by the, for the value of the property itself.
Yeah, because I just wonder how far this contamination's gone. Because I've contacted DEP myself.
Mm-hmm.
And, because I live on the Ridge Road.
So one of the influences on property values, just for taxation purposes, and I haven't looked at this for all details, but usually there's an influence in property values for taxation purposes that it's considered site improvements, so that if you have a piece of property that has a well and septic on it, it has a different value than if you have just straight land.
Right.
So when the assessors are in the office, I will ask them about that and bring these folks to their attention.
Make adjustments because.
But the other thing is, and yes, I understand that it's not just the wells, but there are a lot of folks in the state of Maine who do have filtration systems at their homes for drinking water capabilities. So again, if we're patient and work through that, but yeah,
Ms. Ward,
definitely.
about the soil contamination for the farmers out there, growing the crops and the hay, contaminating more personnel and other people too, because that's their livelihood. If the soil's gone, the property's not worth anything, and their livelihood's gone.
Yep.
That's what I'm concerned about.
Okay, that's something we'll move up on.
Would it be all right if I made some comment?
Yeah, unfortunately,
No.
it's,
Because I was going to during the earlier part, but after Stan spoke, it zipped right
well,
through.
nobody got up, nobody stood up, so.
No. Not at this time.
All right. So the next regular meeting of the Fairfield Town Council will be on Wednesday, December 16th, 2020, to be held as a hybrid meeting via Zoom in the council chambers at 6:30 PM, depending upon what we decide. Could be just a Zoom meeting itself.
Yep.
At this time, we will recess and sign all documents that require the signatures of the council members.
Motion?
So moved.
We are recessed.
Second? We have a second?
Third.
You're the
Third.
second. Mark, okay.
Fifth.